Welcome to the Cult Hit podcast. Yeah, the Cult Hit. I don't really know what a cult hit. I'm not like grooming you to sleep with your partners or anything, am I? Am I? I don't know. Am I? I might be. No, definitely not. Well, anyway, this is Werewolf the podcast, and I'm your werewolf Will, and we're carrying on with our story from the last few episodes. We have another wonderful actor in today to take a role, and yeah, it's all looking good. There's loads of things in the description. If you want to join the lunatics in the Facebook group, then just follow that description. If you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all the other shite that's out there, then go for it, because I quite enjoy interacting with you guys. It's good fun. If you've got any questions or ideas or anything like that you want to tell me, I'll tell you. Thank you very much. Also, I would like to say there's a new book out, which is just the 30 transcripts from the other 30 transcripts of the podcast. So you can go and buy that. You can buy the first book. Do you know what? You can just do what you want. You can also give me money if you want. There's like a buy me a coffee thing there. If I'm such a cult leader, and I'm such a cult, then you could buy me a coffee. That'd be really good. For those people who've bought me coffees and stuff, love you very much. That's really good of you. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to the story. We're in Nixieland or something, aren't we? I think so. Nixieland? Dixieland? No, Nixieland.
So, this is not the classic werewolf. We have something here that was born from some ritual magic a couple of thousand years ago. The chaps down the lab found this one particularly interesting, yeah. Classic shamanic magic, apparently born from the incorporation of fly agarics with faith and fear. As we know, faith and fear have illicit energies of their own. With their combination and the use of hallucinogens as spiritual communicants, we get this small tribe of werewolves.
He looked up to see if we was following, but I was doodling, but like, paying attention. He continued.
Well, I think there's roughly 80 of them in the tribe.
He did those air quote things for the word tribe.
You know, as they refer to themselves. Most of them currently reside in and run the city of Surgut on the river Ob, Ural Mountains. I suppose we can safely say they own that area. These are very different werewolves in this case, and they're not the free-roaming individual cursed people of the classic Western folklore. They're something new. Well, you know, new, but old. It's a little confusing.
He looked up at us as though this was like some kind of, I don't know, exciting information or something.
They're damned interesting, though, because the human is one part of a partnership.
He paused for this to sink in. Sulu as well, she was wrapped. I had almost perfect Snoopy on his little doghouse on my pad.
The other part of the pair is supposedly, and as far as we can label this entity as anything at all, a wolf soul.
He paused again for a minute for us to consider this incredible bit of news, as it would be difficult for most people to accept. It was easy for me to accept. I'd been doing this job for like 3 years now, and the shit I'd seen in that short time made it very easy for me to believe that people were sharing their lives with wolf souls. This was Professor. Just Professor. No more, no less. He was an expert in something that we thought they would never need to be an expert in. He was an expert in the supernatural criminal at the quiet off-prospectus course of Leicester University. Yet, that unworldly, unrenowned university was a place where you could do the sneaky-peeky degrees and diplomas for those of the secret world. A lot of them were boring things to do with, like, anti-terrorist shite, classic battle tactics, criminal psychology, and other standard sneaky-peeky stuff. But the prof... well, he was the world expert in the supernatural criminal world. Not just the world expert in supernatural shit, but in the supernatural criminal shit. I wonder what he told his family and his friends he did. Did he have family and friends? Shit, I was getting distracted. He was sitting on a modern office chair in a modern office in a modern office building. I was with DC Sula Abdi. My name is Ben Johnson. Yep, I know. The name is a bit ridiculous. If you've had a decent education, you should know that Ben Johnson was a great poet and writer. If you were uneducated and a bit like me, you'd recognise he was an outstanding footy player for the Hammers, as we call them in this country. My football team. Me ma always wanted me to be the playwright and the poet. I always wanted to be, well, the fucking Premier League football player, to be honest. But due to this, distinct lack of sporting talent and a distinct hatred of poetry, I'd somehow ended up being a copper. I mean, I could argue pretty fucking successfully, if anyone would actually believe me that I did the job that I did, that my work was vastly more important for the world than theirs combined. Sadly, the nature of my work meant that I would never get the personal renown I deserve for the work I do. Arresting fairies and warning warlocks seems like something of a makey-uppy book. I'm one part of a pair of officers that look after the supernatural nonsense that happens in most of London. See, you don't believe me already, eh? And you're reading a fucking book about a werewolf. Sula, my senior, is a genius, incredibly good-looking and stuffed full of natural charisma. In the world of coppers, she's definitely in the Premier League. When I compare myself to her, I come from a couple of leagues down, but I'm an hard worker and diligent who can get the job done in most cases. I've worked my way up from the Sunday five-a-side pub league to teetering on the brink of, left-back grinder for Southampton. Anyway, back to the professor. He was obviously a clever man. He just looked clever. He looked like the kind of guy who, could iron his own shirt properly and did so in order for it to be correct. He looked like the guy who went jogging in the morning because he enjoyed it and not to lose the belly fat that he didn't have. He probably meditated and ate nutritious meals. He was one of those, improbable people I envied, but I was glad I was me and not fucking him. He was also one of those guys that listen to you when you talk. I know that sounds like a weird thing to say, but that is just a rarity. So much so that it's disconcerting when you speak to people like that. They listen to you fully. They then pause and consider what you've just said and then give you an answer. Most people do not do that. Most people ignore what you're saying and are only thinking about what they're going to say next, dismissing what you say as a bit of an irrelevance. The professor, well, he wasn't like that. He paused and listened. This often meant that during the pause that you thought that they were waiting for you to say more. So what you do is you fill that pause with more words, which he considers and then pauses to consider and on and on and on. The other thing that made him stand out as a person was he genuinely was interested in what you said and your point of view and didn't, not see himself as the expert in the room. This is the highest level of cleverness in my eyes. When someone is ready to learn from anyone, whoever they are the ultimate in clever beings. As Sula and Professor conversed, I realised that I was not only the least intelligent person in the room, but that the plastic bread plant in the corner was probably a more profound thinker than myself. Silence. Shit, I wasn't paying attention. Eh? I tried in a moment to regain what they'd been talking about.
What do you know about this Wil character then, Ben?
I have the stuff that we have in the file about him. He was part of the Russian pack out of Circuit. Luckily, they don't seem to particularly like him anyway. They've tried to bin him a couple of times. The professor looked confused. They tried to kill him a few times, I continued. I paused. The prof rested his head on his hand, giving me his full fucking attention, looking deep into my eyes in a profoundly uncomfortable manner as he considered what I'd just said.
Yes, I read the notes,
he said with a slightly annoyed tone.
But what do you know about him?
I felt like I was back in Miss Linigan's literary criticism classes and under pressure to make up some bullshit answer about why the room had blue curtains when described in the relevant passage of the book that I'd not read for the class. He spread the weirdly paper notes on the table. These notes were too important to be put on computers. Usually we'd be looking at a screen or two and a hastily put together PowerPoint. There was a paper file and our little group was sharing it like an old porn mag with your mates. Well, I mean, we shared it professionally, obviously. I started to worry whether the professor could, read my fucking mind with the intensity he looked at me. The prof smiled with what seemed a little bit of disappointment in his eyes. I felt that I'd, failed some basic test that Sula had passed without even sitting the fucking test. He's a murderous, narcissistic psycho, I pitched. He continued.
He seems to be quite a character, does he not? I mean, special forces trained, a remarkable list of missions undertaken and achieved. Some of the things he's done make you have a certain level of disbelief that anyone could have done those things. I suppose the fact that he's a werewolf has helped. The 2 jobs in Crimea particularly stood out for me. They gave me some sleepless nights, to be honest. He seems to have the ability to undertake any task. That was not killing. That was... I don't know what that was. Children? They were just children. I suppose he's the tool that will allow the job to be done. We should be looking at those that set the parameters for such a mission. They're the ones we really have to try and understand.
He sat there in silence. He was looking at the paperwork and shaking his head. He was genuinely disgusted. I looked at Sula, and as she shook her head as if to say, "Don't talk," she knew I had a tendency to fill any uncomfortable silence with verbal diarrhea, and that this was probably the time not to spew any of that shit forth.
I mean...
Again, he paused, reading a sheet in front of him before he was, looking up at the both of us.
I can't imagine why this thing's allowed to live. He didn't leave the army. He killed his commanding officer and disappeared back into the population. Why would they let him do that? I just don't understand the MOD. And last week was the first time this thing's been made apparent to me.
Again, a bit of a pregnant pause.
When I say a thing, I don't mean a werewolf. We know the Russian pack is quite civilized in their interactions with the world. They actually hold together a large part of the Russian economy in the East. But this, I have no other way of describing it. This thing is a real monster. It's the stuff of nightmares. And strangely, they've ignored all of our questions about this one. They seem to want to have nothing to do with what's happening here.
He returned to looking through the papers as though we weren't not even there. I moved to start speaking, but again was waved into silence by Sula. Watching the man in front of us was incredible. The expressions that ran over his face as he read were intense. Moments of severe emotional pain mixed with moments of understanding. He took the pencil off the desk and actually put it between his teeth, biting it at certain key points as he winced. After a few pencil masticating moments, he placed it back on the table. It was now chewed to quite a significant level. He wiped his palm across his face. He closed the file, closed his eyes, and breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth a few times before continuing.
Right, all those things are in the past,
he said before he opened his eyes and looked at the both of us.
200 positive kills, a lot of successful missions. He probably stopped millions from dying with the espionage job on the Northern Fleet alone. If we support the ethics of utilitarianism laid down by good old John Stuart Mills, we must follow the quote of the most outstanding scientist ever known. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one.
He said as he smiled and leaned on the table with his forearms. Sula burst into a fit of giggles, as did the professor. I, as usual, had no idea what was funny. The joke went right over my head by a few feet. The professor made a weird hand signal, palm flat out to us, and doing like a victory V, but with the index finger and middle finger together and the ring and little finger together. He showed it to Sula, and she copied it, laughing, and they both turned to me, smiling. Confused, I kind of made the best stab at what I thought was happening. I'm not in the Masons or anything, I told them. They both laughed. No, it's from Star Trek. Spock's signal for live long and prosper, said Sula. They continued staring at me as though this made a difference and I would, instantly grasp what was going on. I lifted the top of the file so that I didn't have to make eye contact with either of them. I like football, I said to them hesitantly.
Anyway,
continued the prof,
he's done the civvies a bit of good as well, I suppose. The Were-Rat brothers were, I suppose, dealt with. We'd been having problems with them for a long time, right? The unicorn as well. A protected species. Well, not so protected from him, now is it? I suppose his finest work to date is removing the Sumerian vampire goddess and her blood cult, although, having heard what's happening over in the Eridu site, that one's going to come and bite him in the, neck, I suppose.
Again, Sula and him shared smiles.
Well, I suppose you could argue we've been using him as a TFCT?
He held Sula's eyes as he waggled his eyebrows, who burst into an understanding laughter at the acronym, which I guess I was too stupid to guess. More stupid fucking Star Trek or Wars or whatever. She looked at me as a mother does her special child. A tool for a certain task. She translated for me, laughing.
I think we have a winner with this one,
He said.
She is a Miss Sally O'Neill, former resident of a small village in the north of Scotland. Nothing to note until the day she met our anti-villains of the piece, Wil and Fen. She applied to be a dish of the day when he picked her up whilst hitchhiking to Manchester from her not-so-jovial home. For some reason, and I cannot really say why, she still lives. Her family was murdered a few days later, obviously done by Wil, and in her presence. Then she disappears from the globe for a while, returning sometime later. We think she'd been in Surgut itself. We've nothing but some rough CCTV footage of her face recognised in Amsterdam. We believe she picked up a wolf soul somewhere along the way. We're unsure if she was introduced to one by Wil or was chosen independently. That would be quite a coincidence, though. Anywho, she is definitely a werewolf.
Listening to all this, I thought, well, now I could ask a decent question. How do we know that she's a werewolf? I asked.
Well, there was a dog attack on a group of young tourists in Bala. It took a lot of covering up between the different departments involved. There were real issues because most of those attacked were not British citizens. The truth behind the attack is here, in these pictures.
The professor placed one or two pictures in front of us. They were pretty gruesome.
As you can see, the group was attacked by creatures shifting between wolf and wolf-man. Sorry, I suppose that's outdated language these days. Should it be wolf-person? You know what I mean, though. In this one, you can gauge the size of the wolf by the scale of the leg it has in its mouth, unfortunately. The attack was the day before the pair were reportedly in Aberystwyth. It's an assumption that she's the white wolf, but I'd say it's a pretty sure thing.
He shuddered and then he continued.
What's going on between them seems to be somewhat complicated. She seems to have come to his rescue during his accidental attack on the Nixies. I have a feeling he didn't know what they were. On the other hand, she seems to have known exactly what to do, blasting them with music and sending them running. How are the Nixies doing, by the way? I haven't seen them for a while.
They are slightly shocked by what's happened in that night, but they seem happy that we'll deal with the situation. They've done nothing to show any objection in general, said Sula. They're not asking for revenge or anything more, so really we've come to you because this is not that simple or straightforward a thing for us to deal with. What I hope would be the situation is that the werewolf has, learned his lesson and realises that the Nixies are not to be messed with. I have a good feeling that's not the case. I really have a good feeling that a character like Wil will not simply walk away from this. I have a horrible feeling that he will want to, exact some level of revenge. What do you think, Professor? Sula asked.
Call me Simon.
Smiled the puff. I looked at my Snoopy drawing and held the sigh that wanted to escape externally, internally. They all try and flirt with her, and she will quite happily let them if it makes her job easier. Seldom happens for me. I'm a bit ugly, you see.
I think the werewolf will find the Nixies and try to kill them. Looking at his psychology, he'll want to make himself feel better about what's happened. Yes. He will most definitely attack the Nixies, and we can't let that happen, I'm afraid. The outcome of that event could be awful. We have to support our fairy friends in this one and somehow remove the werewolf threat. How we do that's the difficult thing. I don't think we'll be able to locate the wolf until he holds his head up to attack the Nixies. He's just too well trained. We don't have the, person power to do it. Shame we have to keep all this supernatural stuff stum. Otherwise it would be much easier.
Simon said. The game? Simon? Never mind. So, basically, what we're about to do is use homicidal maniac water creatures who could cause huge amounts of horror and death if provoked as a bait for a sociopathic werewolf who has been trained as a super soldier? I asked. Simon nodded. Sorry. I thought it was going to be a difficult thing to do. Now that I've defined it down to its easy terms, I can see how simple this is going to be. Sula laughed. Just another Wednesday afternoon's work for us, Ben. I smiled and continued with Woodstock balancing on fucking Snoopy's nose. Just another fucking Wednesday afternoon. Fuck's sake. Thanks for listening. That's the end of the podcast for this week. Go to the description to do all the things that you can do in the description. Please do. The Facebook group is growing massively. I've got followers on things. Yeah, followers. And we have been discussed as being a cult horror podcast. Why can't I just be a horror podcast? Why does it have to be a cult horror podcast? Do you feel you're part of a cult? What a cult. Anyway, thanks to Gregory for being the actor in this, and go and read his first book, Il Lupo, and Il Lupo 2.0 is his latest book that's out. And go and listen to his podcast as well. It's very good. I'm on there and I'm really good, and he's got other people on there who obviously aren't quite as good as me, but nearly, if you know what I mean. Stuff's happening. It's really exciting, and I don't really know what to do with all the attention this podcast is getting. But thanks for being attentive. Not anally retentive, but I'll just shut the fuck up, eh? I know at this point, I know what I like to do. I like to tell you all, I love you. Bye.